October 23. We're glad you're joining us here at SundownSurmisings. My name is Daniel Gregory, and this is Jeff Deming, PJ, and Deg. And we continue our series on pictures of Jesus. Yeah. And this is kind of cool. We're at, for Adventists, October 23 is a big day, actually. It's Friday. And for us, it has a long denominational tradition of being a significant date. But we hope we will not be that kind of disappointment as we look tonight at pictures of Jesus. We're going to go into one of PJ's stories. It's going to be in the Gospel of Mark. Tell us about it. What's your...
Well, we actually have a friend of ours who was born on the 22nd.
I do too. I always send him a happy birthday because I can't forget that.
Yeah, so happy fall. We just turned the corner for fall. So one of my stories, I wish sometimes we knew what time of year we're in. You probably could figure these things out, but sometimes I wonder when
this story happens. That's a good question.
Yeah, I always wonder kind of sometimes where the white space is, what's taking place, the season's changing, is it chilly? Yeah.
Is it hot? Is it what? Yeah. Because that would change sort of the feel of the story.
Correct, exactly. So this story, I'm really excited about this story in the sense this is one of my favorite stories, just kind of the way Jesus, that snapshot, So Dad, right before this story, tell us what's significant about the Transfiguration. Just give us a little bit of...
Okay, thank you, because I was trying to remember what happened right before. Tell us right before. Well, if you tell me what, I'll say, okay, Transfiguration, oh wow! This is one of the landmark passages in the Bible that reveals the glory that God has for us, right? So we often sometimes think about, Jesus is God and He has all this glory, and that's true, right? And Jesus is transfigured, and there's, I can go into the Greek behind that, and there's some interesting words because the word is metamorphosis. He's changed, metamorphosized, which is the word that Paul will use later talking about us. We will be changed, metamorphosized, right? And so that's our tie-in. But it also harkens back to Moses and the garden, right? So you have 3 times in the Bible where the glory of God shines through people so that clothes are either unnecessary or they're an encumbrance, right? So Adam and Eve, it says they were naked and unashamed, and they had this glory about them that they lose at the fall. And we know that it wasn't necessarily, in a sense, a permanent, but it was a condition given that God says, this is a sign of our relationship. Because Moses then goes up to the mount. He's there for 40 days. He doesn't know that he's being transformed. Right. All he knows is he's hanging out with his favorite friend. And he comes down the mountain, and everybody's like, you're so blinding, please put a bag over your head. Yes. Like, wow, this insight. And now you get this in the Mount of Transfiguration. Jesus goes up and he takes 3 disciples who want to be closest to him, Peter, James, and John. And the other 9 are down below at the bottom of the mountain, which is where the scene will pick up when he comes back down to, right? Yes. But the powerful thing is he goes up there and he reveals what already is. In other words, he's not putting on airs. It's his human flesh. His becoming flesh was actually clothing his divinity, and on the Mount of Transfiguration, it's simply revealing who he really was, and they got to see him as he really was, and then they're like, wow, and it's just overwhelmed.
Well, overwhelmed, yeah. Well, Dad will put that story right up here, just so you can see and reference that as well. You can read that story, because it does set the tone. Yeah. And one of the things for me is, through our experiences, with whether we're our own personal experiences, we've had mountaintop experiences.
Yes, yeah.
And then Monday comes
down to the I see, that's like that Amy Grant song.
Yes,
right? Yeah. Put a link up there for that too.
So they have this mountaintop experience, but sometimes it's like when you come back to something, and either your classmates or your family members, they didn't experience the same thing. And it's kind of tough to how do you go into that? And so what happens in this story is that Jesus and his 3 disciples coming down the hill. The other disciples are down at the bottom of the hill where it's kind of becoming very tense.
Yes, you have, and what a powerful visual metaphor I now have of Christ descending from glory to save
the situation.
Right? And he comes with those that he's trying to show, and everything is about revealing who God is. And he comes to what is a mess, and people see him glowing, and they know this is our solution. They run up to him. But it's not exactly the kind of warm welcome that you might expect.
Correct. And what takes place in the story is that the disciples, there was a gentleman who brought his child.
Yeah.
And I think probably the one thing, and people have always said this, do you remember if your dad ever said, like, you got punished, this hurts me more than
you? Yeah. Or hurt me more than you're like, I don't think you have those words right.
I was going to change places. Let's see how that is.
Yeah.
So, but now that I've become a parent, and even sometimes with our students, when they're hurting, my depth of care and understanding of that pain, and you want to remove that. So this story is a father has a child who has issues. There's lots of issues, medical, demonic, whatever it is, has issues. And so he brings him to the disciples. Now, what's curious with this story, what kind of is a good telltale sign for us sometimes is, and probably the theology would be very much into this, would be the idea that what they're asked to do, they have been able to do before.
They've already done before.
Yeah.
This is not actually out of their wheelhouse if they're in the proper mindset relationship with Jesus. But so they appeared not to be in that mindset.
Well, and I think that this is a picture of like, we got left here.
Yeah.
Now, the good news is that Jesus heals his son. I'm going to give that away right now.
Absolutely. Spoiler alert.
Yeah. But it's the picture in the middle I want to hone in on.
Okay.
So let's go to Mark 9.
Okay.
Together this evening. Again, if you have a hard copy, I'm using the, I always forget the New American Standard, and I think you're in the New King James or King James. Okay. And so Mark 9. And in verse 16, I want to see what word it says. Read for me verse 16. So 9:14 the story starts, but then verse 16, Jesus is down. He sees that there's an issue. He sees his problems.
Right. All right. So we're in Mark chapter 9. I'm going to start at verse 14, and we're going to get to his thing in word in question in verse 16. And when he, speaking of Jesus, had come to his disciples, he saw a great multitude about them. The scribes were questioning them. And right away, King James says, straightway, all the people, when they saw him, were greatly amazed because of his transformation.
Yep.
And they ran to him and saluted him or greeted him. So there's a problem, and they run right to Jesus, which is at least a good instinct. And he asked the scribes, what are you asking them? What question ye with them is the word.
The NIV talks about this as what are you arguing about?
Oh, wow.
And
interesting.
Yeah, the NIV, and I love that terminology. And here's what's interesting. You and I have walked into classrooms where we see something's going on.
Right, and you can tell.
Yeah, there's a conversation. Yeah, or churches or people or, they're having a discussion. Something's happening. What are you arguing about? What I love about this story, this is the first snapshot I really love about the story, is that there's a lot to be told. And if you've ever had children, and what are you guys arguing about? One of them wants to speak up first. But here, there's a mess.
I didn't even realize it. You're right. It's not the father who talks.
No.
It's one of the multitude answered. Although it says he uses the words, one of the multitude answered, Master, I have brought to you my son. So maybe it is.
I think it's the father.
Yeah.
But he doesn't want anybody else to get sidelined because he knows the Pharisees are going to be like this. Yeah. The disciples are like, why'd you leave us? What the world? But the Father speaks up because there's an important message that he has to get across. And I love how he jumps in on that. And I love how Jesus allows it.
Yeah.
So continue on.
All right. And one of the multitude answered and said, Master, I brought to you my son, which has a dumb spirit. Which is interesting because he brought it to the disciples. And wherever he goes, the spirit tears at him and he foams, he gnashes his teeth, he pines away. I spoke to your disciples that they should cast this demon out, but they couldn't. He answered him and said, O faithless generation, how long will I be with you? How long will I put up with this? Bring him to me. So
I don't know the Greek or Hebrew on this very well.
I'm not sure either.
But I want to tell you something. What I really love about that is, as I brought to you my son, he actually brought the disciples first. And what I love about that picture is that we are God's extension. Yeah. When people see us, when they see that we're followers of Jesus, they want to come be near. And so sometimes it's important for us to have something to give them. and that's what we talked about. The disciples were struggling. They had done this before. They're struggling
The
now.
disciples are the stand-in because, he may be saying, I was trying to hunt you down and went looking for you.
Correct.
I'm bringing my son to you. But the disciples were there, and I've heard that they've been able to do it, but they couldn't. And now he's like, well, maybe this is beyond what can be done. And almost maybe insinuating maybe it's more than what you can do. And Jesus is like, whoa, trust me, I got this.
Well, what I want you to hear the next line, that Dad already read it for us, is verse 18. I want you to hear the list. And I want you to hear it as a list.
Wow.
If you've ever had a medical issue, or you've ever had a problem, you've had to go somewhere, and it becomes like, well, what are the symptoms? Right, you just list them off because you're and what I see from this is he's been telling everybody. He's
got that story down.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
And I was wondering, it's like, it does this, it does this, it does this. Yeah, so read that again, and I want you to listen to it for a moment, and the idea of this person is told this, it's not even really a conversation as much as a checklist.
All right, so I have a son, and wherever he goes, this spirit tears at him. He foams, he gnashes his teeth, he pines away, which means he's like not eating, he's wasting away. And so he's got a list of 4. And I spoke to your disciples to cast this demon out, but they couldn't.
So they brought in verse 20, it says they brought him to Jesus. And I read verse 20 for us, Dick, and then hold there.
All right. They brought then this boy to Jesus. And when Jesus saw the boy, straightway, which is interesting, it's the same word used above.
Yes, it is.
Immediately the spirit tore him, and he fell on the ground, and he wallowed, foaming. So he is actually getting a demonstration of exactly what the Father said.
Yep. I want to take you just a little bit into the situation, and you probably experienced it or seen it. We've seen them in places. When something different happens in the world around us, we naturally move away. It's strange. If we see someone that's out walking along the sidewalk that's a little different, maybe has some kind of issues, and we go around them.
Crossover,
And so what I envision right here in this moment, when this boy starts seizing, when it starts going through what he just described happens, I see that maybe the crowd has backed away, and they begin to do this to each other. They begin to talk about things, about the situation. And here's where the power of this story comes in. I don't know what you've been through. Dad, you and I have been through some things. And sometimes when, one of the things I love about Dad here, I'm going to talk about it for a moment, is that when I go up and see him, and he says, I say, hey, I got a question for you. And he says this response back almost every time, I'm listening. You've turned your focus. Now, his fingers may still be going because he's got a multitasking across the keyboard, but his ears have tuned in and he says, I'm listening. And so this is what I want you to take for just a moment and see, because that's been such a picture in our relationship of Jesus for me from this story. Because Jesus says to the man, he asks him, how long has this been happening to him?
Yeah. How long has it been like this?
Because one of the things that when we go through heartache, we go through struggles, there's no remedy or medicine to say you're done with this. There's nothing that says you're done. And so for this man, he probably doesn't get invited to any of the bar mitzvahs anymore. Doesn't get invited over to synagogue.
No, not his child.
Family gatherings are,
Or he might be invited as long as you don't bring, You
can bring his child. But Jesus is interested to know how long has this been going on. And what I love about this, from the picture we just had on the mountaintop, where his divinity, he knows exactly the answer to his question. But he takes a moment to say,
gives the Father a chance to voice.
Because no one listens anymore to him.
No. And I just thought of this, right? There's plenty of miracles where a father shows up or a master shows up to have a slave. And you don't have to even bring the child or bring the servant.
Correct.
But this guy, he's tied to his son. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm like, this is his son. This is his life. He wants to see it happen. He wants to spend this moment of this healing with him. I never thought about that. It's like, it's not just like, I got this son, left him at home a little embarrassed, I know you can heal him from here, right? We see those stories. But he's like, I'm going to take my son out with me. We're going to walk this together. But he's also tired of walking this, I think. I mean, how long?
Yeah.
And
I believe the rest of the story, he tells Jesus, and Jesus says, and the man says, help me if you can. And Jesus responds, and Deb just kind of gives the end of the story a little bit, because that's powerfully, he said, he's tied to this, because he says, if you can do anything to help us.
Yeah.
He really does tie himself into this.
Yeah.
And he makes himself a connection, because this is their journey now. This is not removed over here. This is part of us.
Help us. Wow. It says it twice.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the idea that, and what I want you to know tonight is that, Dad, we go through highs and lows.
Yeah.
You know, you go through the summer times and the fall weathers and then the winter times.
Yeah.
You go through the seasons of life. But sometimes you're out there and you're wondering, does anybody care what I'm going through? And this story, this snapshot, this picture is so powerful for me that Jesus does want to know.
Yeah.
How long have you been going like this?
How long?
Yeah.
How long have you? Wow. Wow. That is so cool. I hope that we mentioned before, and I keep saying, I'm looking for Jesus in the nooks and crannies of the stories, because I've been through this story, I've heard it, and maybe you have too. But maybe you caught something this time. You know, Jesus just spending that extra time when he already knows the answer, but he's asking the Father because he actually cares and feels with the Father.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's super powerful. That's the kind of God worth worshiping. That's the kind of God worth singing about. And if you don't know that God, man, we challenge you, just read and trust. This is real. These stories happen. This isn't make-believe. There's a God who would take the time to listen to whatever you've been experiencing. And Lord knows 2020 has been one of those years where you might go to God and say, God, are you hearing me? And God does. Yeah. And that's a powerful lesson. Wow.
Isn't that cool?
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for joining us. Look forward to next week. Special story from John that actually is going to tie in some to this and some to what we covered last week. And if you missed last week, go back and check it out. And at least for next week, subscribe and catch that notification for next week. We'll see you then.
Bye.